so I already told her that. So
Okay.
she's like, I know, and then it's like stressing me out because everybody asks what the dress code is. She's telling me you can wear jeans and a shirt. I'm like, baby, it's normal. It's a wedding. But then she's like stressing it out, like no black, no white. Which I know not to wear white because you don't want to.
Right.
No, the bride's wearing white. So you don't want to overdo the bride.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Well, we're still within our theme of trials, temptations, and testings, and faith. And if you remember, in the last couple of sermons, we covered at some depth these topics. And what are the trials designed for, we have discussed. They're designed to improve us, to make us better. And in a way, trials and testings are what? Where do we get tests at? Usually in educational institutions. School, kindergarten, college, and you go on and on and on. Tests. They are the part of our educational system or educational flow in our life. So in a way, James will be talking right now about our Christian education, our daily life education in Christian faith. And the topic of today's sermon is how to gain a proper perspective on life based on our faith. I will be using a Lexham English Bible in the sermon today. It's slightly different from the translation that we read from, and in a way it simplifies the English terminology and makes it a little bit more clear. But let's go over this text that we have just read from James and figure out what is he trying to teach us. Understand this, my dear brothers. Every person must be three things: quick to hear or to listen, slow to speak, and slow to anger. In fact, this was the ancient rabbinical formula for learning for any student. You must be quick to hear, meaning you have to pay attention to details. And don't try to speak too fast, meaning asking questions about this very thing that you have just heard. In a way, if we look at today's education, children don't listen. Students don't listen. Everybody thinks that they got it all, you know, and the teachers, they're just there because they're getting paid for what they're doing. They're not necessary. I know it all, you know. And this attitude also underscores the feeling of pride that every person is projecting in their life, and that pride is not being controlled. But also when we are learning something or we are hearing something and we don't understand or we don't comprehend, often at times it raises in us the feelings of anger. Oh, I don't know, what is he saying? What in the world is this? You know, I don't understand what it is. What does God want from me? Anyways, from the scripture. So, in a way, James is using the ancient rabbinical formula for educational rules. Be quick to hear or listen. And the word hearing in Hebrew also means obeying, meaning following through. Be slow to speak, meaning don't spit out words out of your mouth without thinking them through. Don't ask or rush questions before you finish listening. You know, sometimes in our day-to-day conversations, we don't listen to the person to hear what they're saying. We're listening to them short enough to find out what answer we already prepared for them. So it's very selfish in a way. And I mean, I have done it, probably you have done it. And this is developing frictions in our relationships because nobody wants to listen. And if you don't listen completely and you don't listen the entire sentence, your answer will be incomplete or misguiding or confusing, and it will irritate the other person. So we are creating tension between each other because we don't listen well. Indian sages said that there's 4 types of students. One type of student quickly listens but quickly forgets. Their superiority in one aspect is annulled by their folly. The other type of students is slow to listen and slow to forget. They aid themselves with their memory. Third type of students, quick to listen and slow to forget. They're wise. And then there's also the worst type of students. They're slow to listen and quick to forget. So they get nothing. So these are Indian sages that said that. The Roman poet Ovid asked the people to be slow to punish someone and quick to honor. Because if you punish somebody and punish them with death, you have no other chances to recover that individual. Philo, a Roman philosopher, actually historian, he asked people to be quick in doing good to others and slow in harming someone. Rabbi Shimon says the following: I grew up among the wise men and discovered that for a person there is no better thing than silence. One who multiplies words commits sins. Joshua from the book of Sirach, it's a non-canonical book, wrote following: be quick to listen and contemplate on your answer. If you have knowledge, then answer your neighbor. But if you do not, may your hand be placed on your lips. In speech are numerous words and disgrace. In fact, we know from the book of Proverbs many such things which say that it is wiser to be quiet. Proverbs 10:19. In many words transgression is not lacking, but he who restrains his lips is prudent. Proverbs 13:3. He who keeps his mouth guards his life. He who opens his lips, ruin belongs to him. Proverbs 17:28. Even a fool who keeps silent shall be considered wise. He who closes his lips is intelligent. And then Proverbs 29:20. You see a man who is hasty in his words, there's more hope for a fool than him. Ancient Greek philosopher Xenon says, we have 2 ears and only 1 mouth, so that we may hear more than speak. And then another Greek philosopher says, how to be wise and rule the country. Do not get angry, speak little, and listen a lot. So you see, this is a universal statement that covers ancient wise men and modern wise men, modern educators, and us as Christians as we approach listening to the scriptures, to the words of God. You know, there was a famous linguist that knew 7 languages, and somebody complimented him. This is a great man because he can be silent in 7 different languages. You know, so sometimes it's not what you know, it's what you hide from delivering to others that brings you more honor. Anger is not producing the righteousness of God. And here we are getting back to the ancient system of learning. In synagogue was not like a church where we just listen to the God's message and there's no interaction. Synagogues were like schools, like a cultural center, like a community gathering, where people, when somebody read the word, they could actually interact with the speaker. So if they did not listen till the end of the reading of the passage and they started asking questions, like remember Jesus said, oh, and this passage is fulfilled, so they started, oh, isn't that the son of Joseph, or isn't that this, or they started asking questions. So, and if they didn't get their answers, or if they didn't understand the passage that was just read, they got angry. So we are immersed into educational process here. And James is telling to his listeners who are mainly Jewish, and they were familiar with this learning formula, that you have to hear more than you speak. Be quiet, listen till the end. Maybe you'll find answers to your question. And then do not get angry, because anger closes the doors of the heart to accept any truth. Because when you get frustrated and angry, you say, oh, don't give me that. You know, I don't want to listen to this. Because I didn't get the answer to this question, I don't want to listen to anything else. It closes the doors of our heart and of our mind to accepting the biblical truth. The word putting aside all moral uncleanness and wickedness and wicked access is a very interesting word. The Greek word behind it means taking off clothing or stripping from old, dirty work clothes, or any dirt that might have stuck to your body. In other words, James is admonishing his readers to get rid of any kind of moral uncleanness and anger or wicked excess. Anger is also excess of wickedness that is spilling out. Just like one would take off his dirty work clothes. Both words that James is using for defining these evil things in our lives, moral uncleanness and wicked excess, are very descriptive. Like the word behind moral uncleanness, it's a Greek word ruparna that is translated here as uncleanness and could mean dirt that is ruining the clothing or body, but also has an interesting other meaning. Did you know that when Jewish scribes were copying the scriptures, when it came to writing the name of God, they were told that once you write a first letter, or before you write the first letter, you have to strip naked from all the clothing that you had before when you were writing a passage or a sentence. You have to go take a full bath, come back, put on a new set of clothing, and write a first letter of the name of God. After the first letter is written, you have to do the same thing. Strip of all your clothing that you just put on a minute ago, go take a full bath, come back, write a second letter, and the same thing until you write all 4 letters of the name of God. And what if there was 2 or 3 times the name of God mentioned in a sentence? That means that you're going to be writing one sentence all day long. And can you imagine what reverence it took and what dedication it took for a person to revere the name of God so much that they would follow this direction for every writing or every copy of the Word of God? Well, in our definition of the word ruparna, which is a Greek word, it could also mean a wax that is clogging the ears. So in one aspect it could be dirty clothes that we have to put off or take off. In another sense it could also mean that medical term from the word rupos, which means earwax. Earwax can limit your hearing ability. It can also render you deaf. So in a way, when we listen to the Word of God, if there's a moral uncleanness in our life or wicked access, it could be an obstacle to our hearing, physically and spiritually. It is possible that James, in this context, is using this word with the medical sense of the word as a hearing, trying to play along with that imagery. The word wicked access that he's using here is a translation of Greek word periseia. Here the imagery of the original word refers to some extra growth in the unexpected place. It could be a growth of a branch on a tree that kind of, veered off to the weird angle, or it could be a cancerous growth in the body that requires to be cut off. So wicked access in this aspect is something that is extra, that's not expected, not in the right place. It's overflowing anger or overflowing wickedness in our life, which supposed to be put aside before we able to listen to the Word of God effectively. But also, James is saying that you have to welcome the Word of God with humility. I think the word of humility is a weak attempt of a translator to translate almost untranslatable Greek term in this passage. The term is prautes. Humility, I don't think is quite describing this very process. Aristotle was the first